Hello, welcome back to the YouTube channel. I'm very excited for today's video because it is also going to be in the form of a podcast. So I'm just going to place this on the desk in front of me. I can't believe that this setup has worked, but I'm really excited about it. For context, I do have a podcast. I don't know why I've never done this, and I've always told myself that this is like a missed opportunity to be recording my podcast episodes also as a YouTube video. So we're going to be doing that today. And whilst I set up sort of my station down here, I'm going to chat about what I'm going to be talking about today and something that I've not talked about on YouTube yet. I've done a couple of episodes on my podcast, so I'll link them in the description box below if you want to go and listen to them. But essentially, I am 27 years old. I'm going to be 28 next month, and I am completely alcohol free. I am sober, and I'm going to be talking about my story in this video, in this episode today. But when it comes to drinking and alcohol, especially as a young adult in her 20s, I want to just share more about like what that journey has looked like, because I've been doing this. I sort of first made the decision in 2020, and throughout the years, obviously, like when you're in social settings and stuff like that can be quite awkward, but I want to share sort of like my experience with it, my background, my story, sort of like what brought me to it, as well as like what that's looked like for me, both as a runner, as a young adult, with friends, with work and a social life, and just like in general, like how it's improved my health and like the benefits that I've seen from it. So I'm very excited for this video. I think it's something that I'm incredibly passionate about other than running. And so we're just gonna dive in and I'm gonna finish setting this up. I also asked on Instagram stories if anyone had any questions about like my journey and anything that they would like me to answer around my journey with alcohol. So I've also got that on my phone screen up in front of me. So I'm going to be looking at that, but this is sort of the podcast setup. It's very basic. Around here, we don't have anything fancy schmancy. This is like the most like fancy thing that I have purchased for myself. So we're just gonna dive in, and yeah, you guys are gonna watch me record a podcast episode. Hi everyone, and welcome back to another episode of the Resiliency in Running podcast. My name is Liz and I will be your host. I'm excited for today's episode because we're going to be talking all things alcohol and my journey with alcohol in the spirit of dry January for 2024. So just sit back and relax and just jump right into the episode. We're also going to pause because there's a siren going by. All right, hello and welcome back to the podcast. If you're new here, I'm so happy to have you. If you are a longtime listener, then you'll know that this is a topic that I am quite passionate about. So I'm really excited to dive in today. But today I want to talk about alcohol, my journey with alcohol, and my relationship with alcohol, and how that is changed over the years, especially as a young adult in her 20s. I feel like this journey can look quite different for all of us, but I just wanted to highlight some of the parts of my journey that may be relevant to some of you, that some of you may relate to. And so I wanted to just kind of share this episode to just connect with others. For those that follow me on social media, I am recording this as both a YouTube video and a podcast episode. I've done this once before with my Chicago Marathon Q&A, and I felt like there was a lot of positive feedback and you guys really enjoyed it. So I want to try and bring that more both onto the podcast as well as my YouTube channel. If you're not already subscribed, make sure that you hit that subscribe button. I will have a link in the show notes of the episode. But before we get into that, let's of course start with some highs and lows for the week. I feel like highs and lows I love doing in my podcast episode because it's just a chance to be like, hey, I'm human, and like these are my highs and lows for the week. And like I feel like most of the time they pertain to my job or like something at work, or I don't know, just like my mental health. And I feel like even then it just really helps like create more of a connection. So we're just going to just add the sound here. Also, if you're watching this on YouTube, definitely leave in the comments your highs and lows for the week. Let me know what your week is looking like when you're watching this, but I'm gonna go ahead and share mine. All right, so my low for the week, I think, is that the weather is so cold here in London. It is, this morning, I think it was like 1 or 2 degrees Celsius, which translates for my American friends to around 35, 34 degrees Fahrenheit. We were just in Copenhagen this weekend and it was even colder there. It was like 20 degrees Fahrenheit and -10 degrees Celsius. I just feel like this time of the year I hate the most because I'm someone who just like really doesn't like the cold. And I feel like for those that that are watching on YouTube, you can't even really tell, but I'm wearing like multiple layers. And like most of the stuff that I wear during this time of year is from Uniqlo Heat Tech. This is not sponsored. I just absolutely love being warm, and their stuff is next level and just such a game changer for me. So I would highly recommend, if you are also a cold girly, like definitely hop on the Uniqlo Heat Tech train. But yeah, the low for the week is that I just don't like being cold. Another low that I want to talk about kind of like maybe in another episode or another YouTube video, also definitely going to be chatting about it in short form content on my socials, so definitely go and follow me there. But I have not been running for the past week, and today was my first run back. And I have been just kind of like dealing with a lot at the moment in terms of like, I've been really ill. In my podcast episode last week, I chatted about an illness where I basically kind of gave myself like a poisoning from my Nespresso machine because I'm pretty sure that I descaled it wrong. So there was a lot of vomiting. There was a lot of early mornings, late nights, whatever you call it, and it was just not a fun time. We've gotten a new coffee machine, so everything is so much better. But I also have been dealing with a niggle that just keeps coming back, and I'm going to be seeing my physio this week, and it's just a bit deflating because I feel like I am a few steps back from where I should be with my marathon training, and I know that we're like at the very start of January still, but I think this is just kind of going back to the fact that I'm so hard on myself. I'm someone who is like such a high achiever, and I think that I've placed a lot of pressure on myself because this is a time qualifier marathon. This is going to be the first of 2 this year, and I'm so excited to do both London and Chicago, and regardless of how they turn out, I know that like it's going to be a great time and such a great experience. But that's just been something that I've been dealing with. And I think that in this training block, I really want to create more content, just highlighting and sharing more about like the reality that marathon training is not meant to be perfect. It's not meant to go to plan. And like, there's never going to be like, you're never going to have a perfect training block. Like there's always going to be something that comes up. Like this is coming from someone who's run 7 marathons. Like I promise you, it is tough. And so I will definitely create more content and talk about that in more detail, but I'm just kind of sharing the realities of like what I'm going through at the moment. But hopefully we're all good to get back into running this week, slowly but surely. But yeah, I think my high for the week is like both sort of, you know, piggybacking off of the running thing, that like today I got to go for my first run in a week, and like I really approached it with the whole mentality of like, I get to run, which I love and I think is so important to remind ourselves, especially when like you're not injured, you're not ill, you're not going through anything that's like causing you to not run. I think it's so important to remind yourself of just like how lucky you are, how, you know, how grateful you should be to have a healthy functioning body. And I think the other thing that I'm really grateful for, and like that is kind of a high for me still, is just like we've been traveling. Gabriel and I have been traveling a lot in the past few weeks. It definitely was not planned, but it kind of just came to be. We were in Portugal for like 8 or 9 days, and then literally the next weekend we were in Copenhagen, and it was such a fun time. Even though it was freezing, it was still such a fun time. And I feel like more and more we really are realizing just like how much, well, at least I'm realizing how much I really enjoy these experiences and how important it is to like go and get that time off, especially like at the end of the year last year. That was like exactly what I needed. So I've definitely come back into the new year feeling very refreshed and like having new goals and things, but I definitely am already like itching to like book my next trip. And even though like you like, I feel like, I don't know if it's just me, but like I'll be at the end of the trip and I'll be like, oh, I'm really looking forward to like getting back to my routine and like getting back into the swing of things. But I, at the same time, have like come back, and whilst I've done that, I'm also now just like, okay, when's the next trip? But yeah, I'm definitely going to be booking more trips. I'm really looking forward to it. But that is besides the point. We've got a whole episode to jump into today. So without further ado, let's just jump right into the episode. All right. So happy dry January, first and foremost. I know that not everyone celebrates or takes part in dry January, but I think that it is a great initiative for those of us who do drink alcohol to kind of like start the year and just like have a break from booze, especially coming off of the holiday season. I know that a lot of people like to drink around the holidays. And so I think it's a great way to sort of kick off the year. I know that people do different things like Veganuary and like other ways of kind of kicking off the year. But today's episode, I really want to talk about alcohol, and I'm not going to go into like specifics or like research articles around like why you shouldn't drink alcohol or why you should, or, you know, I'm not trying to sway you one way or the other. I'm just here to kind of share my own personal experience. And I've done episodes in the past kind of like sharing on more of those other elements that I just touched on. So if you want to go and check those out, they'll be in the show notes of the episode. But essentially, I just want to share from my standpoint, because I feel like at the time, like when I was younger in my earlier 20s, because I am now in my later 20s, I feel like no one was really talking about this. I feel like there was not really any visibility around like, you know, be careful that you don't fall into like the binge drinking trap and like all these things, because I feel like when you go into like university or in college, like a lot of us go in and we don't know anyone and we just want to make friends and like we just want to be liked by other people. And I feel like I went in with that exact mentality, like many of us do. And I ended up deciding to join a sorority. I went to the University of Washington. Go Dogs, even though we lost last night, it's okay. But I went to school in Seattle, and I made the decision to join a sorority, not because I had like a legacy, like, you know, mother or grandmother or someone in like a specific sorority that I wanted to join. I've never, even going through the sorority experience, I wouldn't call myself like a quote unquote sorority girl. Like I definitely did it for the social aspect and just to make friends. And so I joined a sorority and it was a great experience. I still have friends from the sorority and I really enjoyed it. Today I want to talk just more about like the negative aspects of that and sort of like how I feel like the Greek system does not like facilitate that binge drinking issue that is so apparent and so like such a huge issue in college life at the moment. I feel like I can speak on behalf of the US college system, not really on the UK college system or university system, but I feel like I hear about it a lot just like around the world. When you go to college, when you go to university, a lot of us feel peer pressure to drink in order to feel liked, in order to feel validated. And that was essentially me. I wanted to be liked by others. I wanted to make friends. I wanted boys to like me. I literally drank to become this version that people would like. And so I feel like in my first year or two of college, I really realized like the effects of alcohol and like how it really turned me into like this bubbly person who was extroverted and outgoing. Because if I'm honest, like I am a true introvert. I always have been. And for a few years, I labeled myself as an extrovert when I was really heavy into my drinking. And I just realized like how much it would really it really made me likable, if I'm honest. And like, I'm not saying that I was like the most popular kid at college or I was in the best sorority or, you know, I had like, you know, whatever. I think it was just more so that I realized that like I sort of came out of my shell more and I was more, I would say yes more, and I was just like more fun and I seemed more fun to people, and so like people wanted to hang out with me more. I got invited to things more, and so I feel like I really leaned into alcohol because I thought like, okay, this is like how I'm gonna make friends. This is how I'm going to survive college and university. And I feel like at no point, you know, there are a lot of things that I think that need to be highlighted in colleges and universities, not just alcohol consumption, but also issues like sexual assault that I've also spoken about on my podcast before. If you want to go and check that out, you can. But I feel like no one really tells you about what can come from heavy drinking. And before I knew it, I was becoming sort of like what people would call a heavyweight. So I was able to, at one point, I got to a point where basically I was able to drink a lot more than usual and it wouldn't affect me. And this was almost like something that I thought I could show off to people. And I thought it would be like, you know, it's like a party trick or something, like, look at how many shots I can take, look at how much alcohol I can consume, and like, I'm still fine. But like, what I didn't show or what I didn't tell people so much is like how much I was blacking out, how much I didn't remember a lot of nights, and how I would sometimes turn into just like a terrible human being and a terrible friend. And I would say things I didn't mean. I would do things I didn't mean. And the worst part was like coming out of these nights out and not remembering any of it, but like knowing that I'd hurt friends or I'd hurt people in the process. And I'm not going to go into detail. And like, I've since like kind of gone back and apologized to those friends because I hate who I was back then. And I feel like it's really taken me a long time to reflect on that And I feel like, you know, that alter ego of me like really carried on throughout university and then into my master's degree when I came to London. And it was sort of the same thing when I came to the master's degree. It was a way to socialize and meet people. And like, that was the whole thing with networking. And like, London is also a big drinking city. And it's like the way that people interact and socialize and meet and go on first dates. And I found that like, there was sort of like this character of like, you know, I was like the second youngest person in my master's program, and people looked at me as like one of the few Americans, but like, it's the sorority girl and she can drink a lot. And so like, I again just really played into that, and I really leaned into that character because I wanted people to like me. I wanted people in my master's program to like me. And I wish so much that I could go back and just like hug that girl and tell her like, you do not need to do this to yourself. Like, stop putting yourself through this, because like all of the horrible side effects around like massively disgusting hangovers, like wasting away weekends, wasting away like, you know, rotting in my bed for like a full-on like day or two because I was so hungover that I couldn't get out of bed. I wasn't taking care of myself. I wasn't looking after my diet. Like growing up when I was younger, I was like a huge athlete, and then my eating disorder sort of like sidetracked that. I sort of tried to get back into running like around college, and it just felt like for that entire time that I was in college and my master's program, I was just like stagnant, and I wasn't challenging myself. I wasn't looking to improve because that was all I had time to give, because I was allocating so much time to nights out, to alcohol, to spending money on Ubers to go downtown and like meet up with friends. And, you know, there's just so many, to me now, like sitting here, I just see like so many negative side effects to drinking and like my experience with it. And that is why I don't drink now. And again, I'm not here to tell you whether you should or shouldn't drink. Like, that's completely up to you. It's just for me, like, that was such a negative effect on not only me, like as an athlete, because, you know, now I'm like running marathons and things, but I just think that like also as a person, like I became so forgetful. I would forget like the most like simple things, and my family used to make fun of me for it, but like genuinely I can attribute it to my drinking. I've like sort of stopped drinking for a few years. It's insane how much my memory's improved, and it is also like so scary to know that like that may have been like a huge factor and a huge contributor. And like, if I'm honest, like in college, especially university and American universities, the amount of binge drinking that went on was insane. And like, luckily, like I wasn't doing most of this like in private. I wasn't doing this like alone. I wasn't waking up craving alcohol. It was specifically for that social validation that I was like craving. And so like I would go out and I would finish like, you know, 10 shots, and then I would go on a night out. Like my pre-games or like my whatever with friends was insane. And it was just like, get as drunk as you can before you go out so that you don't have to spend that much money when you go out. And it would set me up for such a bad night. And obviously I put on so much weight. That's, you know, obviously going to come with binge drinking, and that's not something that I want to fixate too much on. But I just feel like, to me, there were so many negative side effects when it comes to my health that alcohol just like wasn't doing me a favor with. And so for me, that was just a very easy decision. I don't want to say easy decision, but I feel like the more that I reflected on it, the more I kind of got to realize like why I wanted to maybe take a break from drinking. And so I want to first start by saying that like this wasn't an easy decision to make. And it was only one that was brought on because of the pandemic and just like being stuck at home, not having anything to do, trying the FaceTime happy hour thing with friends, and like really not feeling like good about it, because I would come out of it and be like, why did I do that? Like, why did I think that was a good use of my time? Like, I don't feel good now. And I really just kind of assess myself, and I feel like this was sort of like the perfect opportunity to do it, because you couldn't necessarily be going out and seeing friends, you couldn't go to restaurants or bars. And so I just told myself, let's just try and see if I can go 6 months without drinking. And that was the first aim and the first goal. And I think that was like easier at first because I was living at home with my parents. I wasn't like going out and actively seeing friends all the time. And it was a time that I also really leaned into distance running. So that's when I signed up for my first marathon. And so I found that like, because I'd become so dependent on alcohol for that social validation, I think the other part of it that I haven't really chatted about yet is that it also became my crutch when I was going through really tough things. So like when I was in college going through my sexual assault Title IX case, I really heavily leaned on drinking because there was so much pain throughout that process that I couldn't like emotionally handle, and I didn't want to emotionally handle. And I think that there were just a lot of hardships that I would face, and I would kind of think like, I just don't want to deal with that. I don't want to deal with the emotions of that right now. And so I would turn to alcohol, or I would ask my friends to go on a night out with me or go to a happy hour. And that was my way of saying like, I choose drinking instead of actually facing up to my problems and dealing with them. And I found that in order to like kind of fix that part where like when I took out alcohol for 6 months, the running, like replacing it with running really helped that. And I think like a lot of us runners can definitely attribute running to not only helping our physical health, but our mental health as well. And I feel like because I, chose to sign up for a marathon, to really stick to a training plan and like, go and really lean into the distance running thing, that was just a really nice way to replace that need to feel. It really helped me like replace like what I used to do with alcohol during those hard times in my life. But at the same time, I feel like running doesn't necessarily allow you to run away from it, but instead it would give me time to really process it and think through it. And so that was really a huge positive that I think I saw at the beginning that I really liked. It was hard because it meant that I was then realizing a lot of things that like I had really pushed down and pushed away from myself. And so like a lot of those things were kind of like coming to the surface and coming to light. And I'm not gonna lie, there were a lot of tears in the first 6 months because it just felt like I didn't know who I was. And it was kind of scary because like, I think a lot of us say that like a lot of us would like to say that going into like adulthood, you know who you are, you know who you want to be, or at least you have some sort of an idea. And I just felt like because I used alcohol for so long to create this like alter ego, like fun extrovert Liz, I really didn't know who like I actually was. And I really spent a lot of time in that time without drinking to try and like find myself again. And part of that was like leaning back into the athletic part of me and leaning back into running and going to the gym and just like making that more of a priority, and like not to have some like sort of a goal around like weight loss or anything negative like I would have in the past. It was specifically just for me and my mental health, and put myself first, to put my physical health first. And that was something that was really positive that I really enjoyed. And sort of since then, it's been definitely like a journey of like figuring out like what I truly want to do with my like relationship with alcohol. And I don't feel like a lot of people kind of just like decide one day like cold turkey, I'm just going to stop alcohol and never drink again. I definitely I set up that first 6-month goal, and then I went to like have a drink with a friend, and I realized I just didn't actually want to drink. And even though I did drink that night, I just like kind of came out of it and thought like, you know what, I actually just didn't even want to drink. And I feel like I could have had that night without drinking, and I could have had a mocktail instead, or I could have had sparkling water, or literally anything else. And so I then decided to kind of like go back to the whole no drinking thing. And I think I'm just going to start to like incorporate some of the questions here that I got from Instagram, but I do like some of these ones around just like the how people reacted when you first decided to stop drinking. And so this person asked, keen to hear tips for managing people's reactions when you tell people you aren't drinking. That's like a huge part of like the whole like being a young adult and choosing to not drink, because like I feel like so much of being a young adult is so centered around like going out to bars and like, nights out with friends and like trying to like, be social. And I think that there's this wrong definition around like going out and being actively social and having to attribute it with alcohol, when actually you can go out and you can have a night out with friends and you don't have to drink. But like, I'm not going to say like, I definitely had some reactions when I first decided to stop drinking. And there was not, I wouldn't say that there was anyone that was like super negatively against it. I think that there were some people that kind of told me, well, you can't call yourself sober because you've not been to AA and you don't have an addiction and you don't have a problem. That was the thing that I hated most, is people telling me that I don't have a problem when like they don't see what goes on behind the scenes. They don't see me blacking out. They're not there with me when I'm throwing up over the toilet. Like obviously that's not stuff that you're going out and actively telling people. And like I have definitely some worse stories that I don't want to share here. But I feel like now more than ever, like people have realized also more and more just like how much they don't need to be drinking alcohol. And so, you know, with like managing people's reactions, I think that like you have to remind yourself of your why with anything in life where you face like backlash or anything. I think, and like it's something that you're passionate about, that you want to like prioritize for yourself. You know, I think it's really important. And like I got reactions like that from my family as well. So like I think I just had to keep reminding myself like, no, I'm doing this for me. I'm doing this for my health and my well-being and just like the future me that I know will reap the benefits of this. Another question that someone asked is around, how did you go about with nights out, friends staying out late, but you going home early and feeling guilt? I'm not gonna lie, when you go out with friends and you're not drinking, obviously like you don't really feel the effects that like carry you late into like the early hours of the evening. I know that friends will like replace alcohol with like energy drinks or like just like other types of drinks that sort of like give you a different effect. But for me, it's always just going to be like a lime and tonic or a Diet Coke or just like something like a soft drink essentially. And I think for me, like I always will kind of like, I think initially it's easy to feel that guilt, like you're like kind of dipping out early, or if you're like the designated driver, maybe like you are struggling to like, you know, get that call to like make sure that your friends get home safely and like get them home safely. But I think for me, like I always told myself that like one of the things that I really wanted to work on with taking a break from alcohol was my sleep. My sleep in college was rubbish. I am not like sugarcoating this. Like when I say that I definitely was averaging like at least anywhere from 4 to 6 hours a night of sleep. And it was so bad. And I remember my brother telling me at one point, like, you need to fix your sleep because like that affects, like that is a domino effect to so many other elements of your health. And for me, like when it came to nights out where I may be dipping out early or I may just be going home early, I just kind of I've gotten to a point now where I just kind of look at it and I think like, well, you know, regardless like of how much fun we're having, I kind of just like get to a point where I'm like, okay, like, you know, it's time for bed for me. It's time to, you know, and I think like sometimes like, especially with running and especially if you're like training for a race or something, you might have a long run the next day. You might have something that you need to like tend to. You might have something that you might have the next morning, like a breakfast or a brunch. And I think it's always nice to know that like, it's okay. I think it's important to like tell yourself that it's okay to go home early and you don't need to like feel that FOMO because you will have other nights out with those friends and you will continue to see them. And I think it's also important to have friends that also like will respect the fact that you're not drinking and like not make you feel bad for going home early, but also to kind of like recommend like other ways of hanging out that don't involve a night out, like going for lunch or going for brunch or just like going for coffee. And like there's so many other ways to see friends other than a night out. But I know that a lot of people love still going for a night out. And don't get me wrong, I love going for a night out and like dancing with friends. I think it's so fun. But I think for me, I just get to a point too where I'm now in my late 20s and I so value a good night of sleep, and I'm definitely more of a morning person than I am an evening person. But I hope that's helpful. The next question asks, how did you decide to go full sober and not sober-ish? So I kind of explored both options, and I know that so like some people will approach this and say like, well, I'm all about balance. So like I won't drink during like these times of the years, or like I will take like, you know, this long of a break from alcohol and then I go back to it, and then I'll take another break and then I go back to it. And the thing is like everyone's going to have a different approach. Everyone's going to have a different relationship with alcohol. So I think ultimately like you need to do, I'm not trying to tell you to sway one way or the other. I tried the sober-ish option, and for me, ultimately, like, it wasn't anything like mind-blowing. It was just that every time I would go back and like have a drink, or like, you know, whether it was a wedding or a friend's birthday or like some sort of an occasion, I just found that like I think I realized more and more just how much it didn't make me feel good, and also how much it affects things like sleep and just like my mood the next day. And I think I just sort of, the more that I stopped drinking and sort of like moved away from alcohol, every time I would go back to it, I would just be like, why was I ever drinking in the first place? And like, I don't know, it was just, for me, it almost like created more and more of an assurance for me that like I definitely wanted to go down the route of just not drinking at all. It's definitely something that like people will approach differently. For some people, the whole moderation thing works, and like if it does for you, that's great. But like for me, I just like, I look at it as like, I don't really look at alcohol the same way that I did. And every time that I would go back to it and see if I felt that way, I just didn't. And I think that that's what's important about this journey as well. If you have a similar journey to me, that like you sort of allow yourself to be like, just be like sort of patient with yourself and just like allow yourself to go back and see if that's like a route that you want to take, and don't feel like you have to go cold turkey, stop drinking, like absolutely done. And so I would say like, I would drink in moderation for a year or two, I think I spent. And like, even then I would only drink like once a year. But like for me, ultimately, it just became more and more apparent that I just didn't really like alcohol. I didn't fancy it. And I now have not had a sip of alcohol since like July of last year. And even then, like there wasn't like a firm decision in July of last year where I was like, okay, no more drinking. This is it. It's just like, it becomes more and more natural to just like not even think about it, not give it a second thought, not feel like I need to like create any sort of like a big event or anything, or feel like I have to drink a glass of alcohol at like an event or something. And like so much so that like I was at my friend's wedding late last year, and I told myself that like, you know, this is my best friend getting married from college, and like, you know, she and I were really close, and like if I want to have a drink, I'll have a drink. But like ultimately it just came to the fact that like Chicago Marathon was like a few weeks out and I just didn't want to drink. I also was driving that night, so another reason not to drink. And ultimately I just didn't really crave it. I didn't like want to go up to the bar and order something. I was okay with, I think I had maybe like a Diet Coke or a kombucha or something. I'm a huge kombucha lover, so I feel like I definitely like having like the fizzy drinks and like the carbonated drinks, and I've really been getting into like some of those like sort of health drinks and like not just going for the Diet Cokes all the time. But I think ultimately like it's just important to kind of figure out what's best for you. Not everyone's going to want to go sober. Not everyone's going to want to drink in moderation. So I think it's just important to kind of see what works for you and be patient with yourself along the way. The next question asks, how did you curb the urge to drink when other close friends around did too? So this was definitely something that I felt earlier on in my sort of journey to like reassess my relationship with alcohol, is like what I'll call it. I think ultimately I couldn't really pinpoint like why I felt that way, but I think now it really comes down to just like the desire to have a drink in your hand. And like, it's literally just physically being able to hold a drink. And like, at the time, I think I felt like, oh, I need to be drinking the same thing that they're drinking. If we're like at a friend's house, or you know, if you're a night out or you're having dinner with friends and you buy a bottle of wine, you know, I think initially it's like, oh, but I want to still feel a part of things and I want to like be a part of this. But over time, again, I just still found that like, I would step away from those events, or I would come away from those events and just be like, actually, I just didn't really love that. And I didn't really like the taste of it. I didn't feel like it was really worth the time. And I think it's hard because like, obviously your friends might have reactions to that. And this goes back to the question around like managing reactions. But I think at the end of the day, it's just important again to make sure that you are surrounding yourself with the people who will, you know, uplift you and push you towards your goals. Like, for example, if it is not to drink alcohol, and to, you know, want what's best for you too. And I think that that's really important. And I'm not going to sit here and say like every single friend was like on board with it and every single friendship still remains the same, because a lot of the friendships that I created when I was younger stemmed from alcohol. And so a lot of those people still live that lifestyle, and like that is sort of like their main like point and source of fun. And so for some of those friendships, we just like sort of fell off because like we found that we actually didn't have much in common other than the drinking. And when I decided that I wanted to stop drinking, we just didn't really have much in common. And that's okay, because like I think the other thing that I learned more and more as I get older is, you know, you get to a point in your adult years, and I'm only 27, but I've just been learning how important like quality friendships are over quantity. And I think it was the other way around, especially in college, you know, when I was seeking validation and just like wanting to be liked. I think it's more important to have people that really genuinely care about you and check in with you and want the best for you. And so, you know, I definitely did lose some friends when I decided to stop drinking, but it wasn't anything that was like a big drama or a big fight or anything. It was just like, okay, you know, that was a friendship that I created because I met them in a club or a bar or in some sort of a social situation. And actually we're very different people when you take out the alcohol, and that's okay. Like it's no hard feelings. Like they live their life, I live mine, and like we're respectful of each other, and that's it. I'm really sad to say that I think that the camera battery sign is flashing at me, so I'm going to try and hurry this up. But last question is thinking of what the very end of drinking and start of running looked mentally. So I sort of answered this, but again, I think that like running really helped to replace that like desire and need to feel like I needed to escape from an issue or a problem. But really over time, it really helped me process them more and just create more time and space for me to just like sit in thought and sit in, you know, some of those like emotions and feelings that I previously would use alcohol to kind of like push away, and instead just really allowed me to face them head on. And I feel like that's a reason why I'm so passionate about running, and I love running because it gives me so much more than just the physical benefits. It gives me so much more than race PBs. It gives me that mental clarity. It gives me like time for myself. It gives me time to really sit and think. And obviously I'm not sitting, I'm running, but it gives me time to just like, you know, have me time and think about like, okay, what do I want to work on this week? Or, you know, how am I going to tackle that problem from last week? And just like thinking about like some of the stuff that I want to set for myself, goals I want to set for myself. So yeah, running is and always will be a very positive thing for me. And I think really ultimately it is because of that time when I made that switch during the pandemic and, you know, traded alcohol to train for my first marathon. And here we are today. But that kind of wraps up the episode. I kind of feel like it was a bit all over the place. We needed to switch SD cards in the middle on the camera because it ran out of space, and now the camera looks like it's about to die. So we're going to wrap up the episode, but I really do hope that you enjoyed it. I hope that you enjoyed listening to the episode or watching it on YouTube, and that you found some connection with it. And let me know if you did. Either send me a DM on social media or let me know in the comments of the episode of the video, and I will see you in the next video. But I really appreciate you coming and listening to the podcast or watching it on YouTube. But do make sure, if you are on YouTube, to subscribe, like, comment, let me know what you want to see. If you like this sort of format of me, you know, videoing my podcast episodes and just like sharing them more in a video format, make sure that you subscribe if you're on Apple Podcasts, or follow it on Spotify. But also make sure that you leave a rating because it helps the podcast so much, and I really do appreciate it. And I will see you in the next episode. All right, everyone, that's going to wrap up another episode of the Resiliency in Running podcast. I really do hope that you enjoyed it. As always, if you have any questions, you can DM me on social media or leave them in the comments of the YouTube video, or send me a message or send me an email, or just let me know. But I will see you in the next episode. Bye. And that is the episode. I really hope that this recorded, and I really hope that you guys enjoyed this. But like I said, at the end of that episode, if you have any questions, comments, leave them below, or you're always welcome to sending a DM on social media. But I really hope that you enjoyed this episode video, and that it wasn't too all over the place, and that you enjoyed just listening to my journey and relationship with alcohol. But I will see you in the next video. Thank you so much for watching, and yeah, make sure to subscribe.